The stars were cold and endless. Commander Elias Kane sat in the small cockpit of his ship. The horizon, listening to the quiet hum of the engines. Space was silent, but Elias had learned that silence could be dangerous. Far away, his radar blinked, showing a strange object drifting near the edge of a dying star. It was an alien vessel, old and damaged, spinning slowly like a wounded animal in the dark. Elias took a breath, then sent a signal. No answer came. He moved closer. The golden light of the dying star casting long shadows across the alien ship's cracked surface. Parts of it looked burned, other parts frozen, when he connected his docking tube and stepped inside. The air was stale and heavy. He heard the low groans of metal shifting under pressure. There were survivors, but not many. They stared at him with tired eyes, their skin pale under the dim emergency lights. They spoke in hushed voices, avoiding one corner of the room. Elias followed their glances and saw her, tall, almost 2 heads taller than him. Standing in the shadows, her silver eyes flashed for a moment, but she quickly looked away. Her skin had a strange bluish glow, and her broad shoulders made her look powerful, yet she kept her arms crossed tightly, as if to make herself smaller. "Who is she?" Elias asked one of the survivors. The man shook his head. "Sira," he whispered. "She's Lauren. Too big, not breeding material." The words sounded bitter, like an insult. But the others didn't seem to disagree. They acted like she wasn't even there. Sira stayed silent, her face hidden behind a curtain of long dark hair. Before Elias could speak to her, the ship shuddered violently. A meteor storm had caught them. Chunks of rock the size of cars slammed against the hull, sending shockwaves through the corridors. Elias grabbed a nearby support beam. The survivors screamed, rushing toward the safe section of the ship, but Sira didn't move. A loose beam broke free above her. Elias ran forward without thinking. He caught her in his arms and pulled her down just as the beam crashed into the floor where she had been standing for a moment. They were pressed together in the strange half-gravity of the damaged ship. Her body was warm, her breathing fast. Elias looked into her silver eyes filled with surprise, and something else, something almost like fear. Then the alarm blared louder, telling them the hull was breaking. "We need to get out of here," Elias said, pulling her toward the docking tube. She hesitated. "Why help me?" Her voice was low, rough, like she hadn't spoken in a long time. "Because you're alive," Elias answered simply. They made it back to the horizon just as a massive piece of debris tore through the alien vessel. From the safety of his cockpit, Elias watched the other survivors' escape pods drift into the distance. But Sira sat quietly, her hands folded in her lap, staring at the floor. She didn't thank him, didn't look at him. She just seemed waiting, like she knew something he didn't. The silence didn't last. The radar beeped again. 3 unknown ships had appeared, moving fast, their signatures strange. They weren't broadcasting any identification. "Friends of yours?" Elias asked. Sira's head lifted slowly, and he saw her jaw tighten. "No," she said. "They've come for me." Her words made the air feel heavier. Elias frowned. "Why?" Sira shook her head. "It doesn't matter. Let them take me. You don't understand what I am." Elias checked the scanner. The ships were arming weapons. "I don't care what you are," he said, gripping the controls. "They're not taking anyone from my ship." The horizon shot forward, weaving between chunks of broken asteroid as the strange ships gave chase. Sira watched him work the controls, her eyes narrowing. "You're risking your life for nothing," she said. Elias didn't answer, his focus locked on the flight path ahead. The enemy ships closed in, their weapons firing bursts of light that streaked past the horizon's hull. Elias pulled into a sharp dive, the ship groaning in protest. They narrowly avoided a direct hit, the blast lighting up the cockpit in a blinding flash. Ciro grabbed the seat to steady herself. Her heartbeat pounded in her ears. No one had ever fought for her before. Her own people had thrown her away. But this human, this stranger, was willing to fight a battle that wasn't his. She didn't know if it was bravery or foolishness. But she knew she couldn't look away when the horizon slipped into the shadow of a massive asteroid. Elias killed the engines. The ship floated silently in the darkness, hidden from the scanners. For a long moment, there was only the sound of breathing. Elias turned to her. "We're safe for now," he said. Ciro stared at him, confused. "Why?" She whispered again, "Why save me?" Elias leaned back in his chair, his eyes never leaving hers. "Because no one should be hunted just for existing," he said. Ciro felt a strange ache in her chest. One she couldn't name. She looked away, but deep inside, a small voice whispered that maybe, just maybe, she was wrong about herself. Far outside, in the dark sea of space, the hunting ships kept circling. They weren't leaving. And Elias knew this was only the beginning. The horizon floated in the asteroid's shadow. Elias kept the lights dim, his fingers resting on the flight controls through the forward glass. Jagged rock walls surrounded them like the teeth of some ancient beast outside the hunting ships. Moved slowly, scanning every dark corner of space. They were patient. Like predators that knew their prey had nowhere to go, Ciro sat in the co-pilot's chair, her silver eyes fixed on the glowing dots on the radar. Each dot represented danger. She could read their movements easily. They were closing the gap. "Moving in a slow net formation, they won't give up," she said quietly. "They'll have to," Elias replied, "because we're leaving." He tapped a switch, and the engines hummed back to life. The horizon glided forward, slipping between two enormous asteroids for a brief moment. It looked like they might escape unnoticed. Then a flash lit up the darkness. A scanner beam had found them. The nearest hunter ship broke formation, accelerating toward them like a spear. "Hold on," Elias said, and the horizon shot forward. The asteroid field became a maze of spinning boulders and sharp debris. Elias weaved through the gaps, his hands steady, his eyes locked ahead. The hunter ship followed, its weapons firing thin streaks of light. Ciro gripped the arm of her chair, her muscles tense. Her people had always told her she was too big, too slow, too clumsy to matter. But right now, she felt every nerve in her body alive, watching. "Ready, eh?" Massive asteroid turned slowly in their path. Elias didn't slow down. Instead, he angled the ship toward a narrow crack in its surface. The gap was barely wider than the horizon itself. "You'll never fit," Ciro said. "Watch me," Elias replied. The horizon slid through the crack, scraping against the rock walls. Sparks flying outside the glass. For a moment, the ship was swallowed in darkness. Then they burst out into open space on the other side. The hunter tried to follow, but the asteroid shifted, and the gap closed just enough to smash its wing, sending it spinning away. "One down," Elias muttered. Ciro stared at him, unsure if he was fearless or just insane. The other hunters were still closing in, their weapons now firing in perfect rhythm. "They won't stop," she warned again. "They'll stop when I make them stop," Elias said, his voice calm, but sharp. They entered a dense asteroid cluster. Here, chunks of ice and stone moved unpredictably, slamming into each other with deadly force. It was suicide to fly through, unless you were desperate. Elias pushed the horizon into the chaos, using the drifting rocks as moving shields. Each time a hunter tried to lock on, a spinning boulder blocked the shot. Still, one blast clipped their tail, making the whole ship shudder. Warning lights flashed red. Ciro glanced at the damage readout. "We've lost part of the stabilizer. Then we'll have to be creative," Elias said, his lips twitching into the faintest smile. Through the chaos, Ciro kept stealing glances at him. He didn't seem afraid. Even when death was seconds away, her own kind had taught her that fear was weakness, that survival was luck. But watching him now, she realized survival could also be choice, and Elias chose to fight, not because he had to, but because he wanted to. The hunters tried a new tactic, splitting up to cut off every possible escape route. Elias noticed it immediately. "They're hurting us," he muttered. "Hurting you," Sira corrected. "They only want me." "Not while I'm here," Elias said, his voice firm. Her chest tightened at those words. No one had ever claimed her like that. They broke out of the asteroid cluster and entered open space. The hunters accelerated, gaining on them fast. Elias flipped a hidden switch on the control panel. 2 panels on the horizon's hull slid open, revealing old but powerful flare launchers. "What are those?" Sira asked. "Distractions," Elias said, pressing the trigger. Bright bursts of burning light shot out into the void. The hunters' scanners caught the sudden signals, mistaking them for new targets. 2 of the ships swerved, chasing the false readings. Elias turned hard toward a nearby gas cloud. The last hunter still on their tail. The cloud was thick with orange mist, lit from within by flashes of static electricity. Flying through it was risky. The static could fry the horizon systems. Elias didn't hesitate. They dove into the swirling orange fog, disappearing from sight. Inside, visibility dropped to nothing. Sira leaned forward, tense. "You can't see where you're going." "I don't need to see," Elias said. "I just need them not to see me." A flash of light filled the cockpit. The hunter had fired blindly into the cloud. The blast missed, but the shockwave rattled the horizon. Elias kept moving, turning sharply to hide behind a massive, swirling eddy of gas. The hunter passed right by them. Disappearing into the mist, they waited in silence, only the soft crackle of static around the hull filling the air. Finally, the radar cleared. The hunters were gone. Elias leaned back in his chair, letting out a slow breath. Sira stared at him for a long moment. "You could have left me," she said softly. "I could have," Elias agreed, his eyes meeting hers, "but I didn't." For the first time, she held his gaze without looking away. Somewhere deep inside her, the wall she had built for years began to crack. And though neither of them said it out loud, both knew the chase was far from over. Somewhere in the dark, more hunters would be waiting. But now, Sira wasn't just a passenger. She was part of the fight. The horizon drifted through a quiet stretch of space. After the chase, the engines ran low, and the air in the cockpit felt heavy. Elias checked the navigation screen, searching for a safe place to land. Beside him, Sira sat silent, her long fingers tapping against the armrest. Her eyes stayed fixed on the darkness outside, as if watching for something only she could see. They hadn't spoken much since they escaped the hunters. Elias didn't push her for answers, but the questions in his mind grew heavier. Why were they after her? Why did she believe she was worth nothing? And what did she mean when she said she wasn't breeding material? A faint beep came from the scanner. Elias spotted a drifting supply station hidden in the shadow of a moon. It was old, half abandoned, but it had oxygen and fuel. He guided the horizon toward it, docking with a quiet thud. Inside, the corridors smelled of dust and stale air. Dim lights flickered above them as they walked side by side. Sira kept her hood low, avoiding the few workers who still lived there. Elias noticed how her shoulders tensed whenever someone looked her way. She wasn't afraid of danger. She was afraid of being seen. They found a small repair bay and settled in for the night. The hum of the horizon systems filled the tense silence. Finally, Elias spoke. "They won't stop coming for you, Sira." She didn't answer. "They almost killed both of us," he continued. "If I'm going to protect you, I need to know why they want you." Sira's jaw tightened, her eyes hard. "It's not your fight," she said. "It became my fight the moment I pulled you out of that ship," Elias replied, his voice steady. For a long moment, she didn't move. Then she stood and walked to the small window of the repair bay, looking out at the dead moon beyond. When she finally spoke, her voice was low, like she was speaking to the glass instead of to him. "My people," she began, "measure worth in size and genetics." Elias frowned. "Size?" Sira gave a bitter smile. "They want perfect balance, strong enough for work, small enough for beauty." I was neither. She turned to face him, and for the first time, Elias saw the faint scars along her neck and arms. They called me too big, too broad. "Unnatural," she said. "So they marked me, marked you?" Elias asked, her eyes darkened. "Non-breeding material. It's a code they put in our files. It means you will never have a mate, never have a family." Elias felt a slow anger building in his chest. "That's why they were hunting you?" he asked. She shook her head. "No. After they marked me, they sold me for labor." Her voice grew tighter. "I worked in the outer colonies, carrying loads too heavy for normal Lurans." "All's property." Elias stepped closer, and the ships chasing us. Sira's gaze dropped. "Bounty agents. When I escaped, they were paid to bring me back." She looked up, her silver eyes locking with his. "If they catch me, they won't kill me. But they will make me wish they had." Silence filled the bay. Elias took in every word, every line of pain on her face. It was more than just survival for her. It was freedom. He crossed his arms. "Then we make sure they never find you." Again, her brows lifted slightly. "You speak like it's that simple." He shrugged. "It's simple enough. Stay alive, keep moving, and if anyone tries to take you, I make sure they regret it." Something in her chest shifted at his words. Her people had told her she was worthless, but this human, who barely knew her, looked at her like she was worth fighting for. Still, she shook her head. "You don't understand. I'm not like you, Elias." "Good," he said, without missing a beat. "One of me is enough." For the first time since they met, Sira's lips curved into the faintest hint of a smile. It felt strange on her face, but it was real. They stood there for a moment in the quiet hum of the ship. Then the docking alarms suddenly blared. Elias moved to the console, checking the screen. A single ship had entered the station's orbit. No identification signal. His eyes narrowed. "They found us." Sira's heart pounded. She had just told him everything, and now it might already be too late. But Elias' voice was calm, almost steady. "Looks like we test your story," he said. Flicking switches to power up the horizon, Sira followed him into the cockpit. As the ship's engines roared to life, she felt something she hadn't felt in years. She wasn't just running for herself anymore. This time, she was running with someone who would run beside her. The station's old docking clamps released with a groan. The horizon slipped free, diving into the dark. Behind them, the hunter ship began its pursuit. But Sira no longer felt the same cold fear. This time, there was something else burning in her chest, something she couldn't name, but it made her ready to fight. The chase had begun again, but now the hunted was no longer alone. The horizon slipped into the cover of a thick nebula. Orange and green clouds swirled outside, their edges lit by distant lightning. The view was beautiful, but it was also dangerous. Static energy crackled against the hull, and every few seconds, the lights inside the cockpit flickered. Elias kept his hand steady on the controls, guiding the ship deeper into the mist. The hunter ship's signal faded on the radar. For now, they were hidden. But the nebula's interference made navigation nearly impossible. "We can't stay here too long," Elias said. "The static will burn out our systems." Sira nodded, but kept her eyes on the glowing clouds outside. "It's strange," she murmured. "All this beauty, and it can kill you in seconds." They found a pocket of calmer space and powered down most of the systems to avoid detection. The horizon went quiet, except for the faint hum of the life support, with nothing to do but wait. The air inside the ship began to feel smaller. Elias leaned back in his chair, glancing at Sierra from the corner of his eye. She sat with her knees pulled up slightly, her arms resting on them, her silver eyes reflecting the nebula's light. "How long were you in the colonies?" he asked, breaking the silence. Sierra hesitated. "Years. Too many to count. They ever let you rest?" She gave a short, humorless laugh. Rest was for people who mattered. Elias didn't answer right away. He studied her face. The faint scars, the way her hands always seemed ready to tighten into fists. "You matter now," he said finally. Sierra looked at him sharply, like she didn't know if he was joking or not, but his gaze was steady, and he didn't look away. A low beep from the console pulled them back. The power reserves were dropping. Elias stood. "We'll need to shut down the heating for a while." Within an hour, the temperature inside the ship began to fall. Cold crept in, biting at the edges of their clothes. Sierra sat wrapped in her own arms, trying not to show discomfort. Her people were strong. But Lauren bodies lost heat faster than humans in low temperatures. Elias noticed her slight shiver. Without a word, he stood and pulled a heavy blanket from the storage compartment. When he draped it over her shoulders, she stiffened. "I'm fine," she muttered. "Your hands are shaking." He replied, "That's not fine." She pulled the blanket tighter, surprised by the warmth still clinging to it. It smelled faintly of him, something like metal, coffee, and the faint trace of old leather. For some reason, it made her chest feel strange. They sat in silence for a long while. The quiet broken only by the occasional groan of the ship's frame under the nebulous pressure. Later, when the power cycled back on for a short burst, Elias made them a small meal from ration packs. The food was simple, warm broth and bread, but Sierra ate slowly, savoring it. "You don't like to waste anything, do you?" Elias asked. Noticing how she ate every crumb, she shook her head. "When you've been hungry enough times, you'll learn not to waste." The lights flickered again, dimming in the half-darkness. Elias caught her watching him. When their eyes met, she quickly looked away, but the faint color in her cheeks didn't go unnoticed. Hours passed, and the nebulous energy storms began to grow stronger. The ship shook with each pulse of static lightning. Elias stood to check the stabilizers, but a sudden jolt knocked him sideways. Before he could hit the wall, Sierra caught him by the arm. Her grip was strong enough to stop his fall completely. They were close now, closer than either of them had been since the day they met. For a heartbeat, neither moved. Elias could feel the heat of her skin through the thin layer of her clothing. Sierra's silver eyes met his. And for once, she didn't look away. Something unspoken passed between them. It wasn't just gratitude. And it wasn't just attraction, it was the start of trust. The ship steadied, and she slowly let go. "Careful," she said softly. Almost as if she was speaking to herself, Elias gave a faint smile. "I thought you said you weren't here to protect me." "I'm not," she replied, but her voice lacked conviction. By the time the nebula's outer edges appeared on the radar, the temperature in the horizon had dropped dangerously low again. They powered up the engines, and warmth began to creep back into the walls. Sierra kept the blanket around her shoulders. Even though she didn't need it anymore, she told herself. It was just for comfort, nothing more, but deep down, she knew it wasn't just the blanket keeping her warm. As they left the nebula behind, Elias adjusted the controls and glanced at her. "We'll have clearer space ahead, but that also means we'll be easier to find," he said. Sierra tightened the blanket around her. "Let them try," she said, her voice steady now. Elias smiled slightly. Hearing the steel in her tone, it was the first time she had sounded ready to fight. not just survive, outside. The nebulous colors faded into the black of open space, somewhere out there. Danger was still hunting them, but inside the horizon. Something else was growing, a quiet bond that neither of them had planned for, and in the cold, dark between. The stars that bond might be the only thing keeping them both alive. The horizon had been flying in open space for hours. The nebula was far behind them, and the stars stretched endlessly in every direction. For a time, it felt almost peaceful, but Elias knew better. Peace in space never lasted. The warning. Alarm shattered the quiet. A red light flashed on the console. 3 ships had appeared on the radar, closing in fast. Sierra leaned forward, her silver eyes narrowing. "It's them again," she said, her voice low. Elias didn't need to ask who she meant. He pushed the horizon to full speed. The engines roaring, the hunter ships split apart, circling like predators. One moved ahead to block their path. Another swung behind, and the third stayed just out of range. "They're hurting us," Elias muttered. Sierra's jaw tightened. They've learned from last time. The first blast hit, shaking the horizon. Sparks jumped from the control panel. Elias swore under his breath and adjusted the stabilizers. "Shields are holding." "For now," he said. But the hunters didn't stop. Their weapons fired in sharp, deadly bursts, driving the horizon toward a large metallic shadow ahead. Sierra's eyes widened. "That's not an asteroid," she said. Elia saw it too. It was a refueling station, old, massive, and barely operational. The hunters drove them straight toward it, knowing the narrow docking corridors would slow them down. Elias tried to break away, but a blast struck the horizon's left thruster. The ship spun, alarms screaming, "Hang on!" He shouted, gripping the controls as he forced the ship into a rough landing. The horizon slammed into one of the station's docking arms, metal screeching against metal. The lights flickered, then steadied. Before Elias could restart the engines, the docking clamps engaged. "They've locked us in," he said. Sierra's eyes darted to the small porthole, through it. She saw armed figures moving along the station's outer walkway, toward their ship. "They're coming," she said, her voice hard. Elias grabbed his sidearm and tossed another to Sierra. She caught it easily, checking the charge without hesitation. They moved toward the cargo bay, the air tense, the sound of metal boots on the docking tube grew louder. Then, with a sharp hiss, the outer door was forced open. For hunters in black armor stormed in, weapons raised, step away from the controls and hand over the lurin. Their leader barked. Elias stood in front of Sierra, blocking their view. "Not happening," he said. The first shot rang out. Elias dove behind a stack of crates, pulling Sierra with him. The bay filled with the sound of gunfire and the sharp hiss of energy bolts. Sierra moved like a shadow. Her tall frame, quick and precise, she grabbed one hunter by the arm, twisting until the weapon fell. Then sent him crashing into the wall with a single shove. Another came at Elias, but he fired first, dropping the attacker with a clean shot. The leader snarled and motioned for the remaining 2 to flank them. Sierra vaulted over the crates. Moving faster than Elias had ever seen, she slammed into one of the hunters, her strength sending them both tumbling across the floor. The final hunter tried to retreat, but Elias caught him with a shot to the leg, sending him sprawling. The fight was brutal but fast. When it ended, 2 hunters lay unconscious, one was injured, and the leader was pinned against the wall by Sierra's hand at his throat. "You're not taking me back," she growled, the leader's helmet visor reflected her silver eyes. "You can't run forever, Lurin," he rasped. "You'll never be free." Sierra's grip tightened. But Elias stepped forward. "He's not worth it," he said. For a long moment, Sierra didn't move. Then she shoved the leader back and stepped away, her chest heaving. They bound the hunters with cargo straps and locked them in a supply room. Elias returned to the cockpit, checking the horizon systems. "We've taken damage to both thrusters," he said. "We won't make it far without repairs." Ciro stood behind him, her expression unreadable. "You risked your life for me again," she said. He glanced at her. "And I'll keep doing it." She shook her head slowly, almost in disbelief. "No one's ever done that for me," she said. Elias' voice softened. "Then maybe it's time someone did." Outside, the station's lights flickered weakly. The horizon sat battered but alive in its docking bay. For now, they had one. But Ciro knew the hunters wouldn't stop. They would regroup, send more. Yet for the first time, she wasn't just afraid. She was ready. Because every time they came, she and Elias would fight them together. The horizon drifted through the dark. The station was far behind them now. Just a fading shadow against the stars. They had repaired the thrusters enough to move. But the engine still groaned with every jump in speed for the first time in days. There were no ships on the radar, no warning lights, no alarms. Elias sat in the cockpit. Hands on the controls, the hum of the engines was the only sound. Ciro stood by the window. Her gaze locked on the streaks of light that slid past in the void. Her silver eyes were distant, as if she was thinking about a place she could never return to. "You've been quiet," Elias said finally. She didn't answer right away. "I don't talk much," she said, her voice low. He glanced at her. "That's not what I meant. I mean, you've been holding something back." She turned, her tall frame outlined against the starlight. "I already told you what I am," she said. "You told me what they said you are," Elias replied. "That's not the same thing." Her eyes narrowed slightly. "Why does it matter to you?" she asked. Elias leaned back in his chair. "Because I'm flying through half the galaxy to keep you alive. I'd like to know who I'm fighting for a long moment." Neither of them spoke. Then she walked toward him, slow, each step deliberate. When she stopped, she was close enough that he could see the faint lines of old burns across her hands. She rested one palm on the back of his chair, leaning forward slightly. "I was not meant to be born," she said quietly. "My parents broke the genetic law. They thought a bigger body would survive better on our homeworld." Elias stayed silent, letting her speak. Her voice was steady, but her eyes carried years of weight. "They were wrong," she continued. "The council saw me as an error, a problem to be erased. But my mother hid me until I was old enough to work." She gave a small, bitter smile. "Work was my life. Heavy loads, dangerous repairs, jobs no one else wanted." She straightened, crossing her arms. "Then one day, they marked me. Not breeding material, useless to the future of the Lyran people. And after that, I was no longer a person. I was a tool." Her words hung in the air like smoke. Elias' jaw tightened. "They were wrong," he said simply. Ciro looked at him, expecting to see pity, but there was none, only something steadier. Something that didn't waver. She frowned. "You don't even know me." "I know enough," he said, his voice quiet but firm. The silence between them grew heavier. Outside, a distant star flared, casting pale light across the cockpit. Ciro turned her gaze away. "You shouldn't care," she said. "You'll get yourself killed protecting me." "Maybe," Elias said, "but that's my choice." Her chest tightened. No one had ever said that to her before, not as a promise. Not without expecting something in return. She didn't know how to answer, so she didn't. Instead, she moved to the co-pilot's chair and sat beside him. For a while, they just watched the stars pass. After some time, Elias spoke again, softer now. "You ever think about what you want? Not what they told you to be, but what you want." Ciro hesitated. She had never allowed herself to imagine that. "I wouldn't know where to start." She said, "Then start small," Elias said. "Right now, what do you want?" Her Answer surprised even herself. I want to not feel like I'm wrong just for existing, she said. Elias looked at her, his expression unreadable. You already aren't, he said. You just haven't seen it yet. Something inside her shifted again, not a sudden rush, but a slow, steady warmth that spread through her chest. She opened her mouth to speak, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, she looked at him, really looked at him, and realized how close they had grown without either of them noticing. The moment stretched, the hum of the ship filling the silence. Then Elias reached out, slowly, giving her time to pull away when his hand touched hers. She didn't move. His grip was warm, steady, real. It wasn't possession, it was connection. Syrah's voice was almost a whisper. You're making this harder. Elias' lips curved into a faint smile. Good, he said. For a long time, they sat there, their hands resting together, the stars sliding past like rivers of light. No words were needed. The confession wasn't spoken out loud, but it was there. Between them, not just attraction, but something deeper, a choice to trust. The radar stayed empty, but both of them knew the hunters would come again when they did. It wouldn't just be Elias fighting for her. Syrah would fight too, because somewhere in the dark between the stars, she had found something she thought she would never have. Someone who saw her as more than what she had been told she was. The horizon floated through the quiet stretch of deep space. For the first time in weeks, there were no hunters, no alarms, no signs of pursuit. Elias had taken the ship into a sector so remote that even trade routes avoided it. The stars here were brighter, sharper, like shards of ice scattered across the dark. Syrah stood at the window in the observation deck. Her tall frame was outlined by the soft glow of starlight. She held a mug of warm broth in her hands, steam curling into the air. Elias joined her. Leaning against the frame beside her, still nothing on the scanners, he said. We might actually be safe for a while. Syrah nodded, but didn't look away from the stars. Safe was not a feeling she was used to. Her whole life had been movement, hiding, and the constant weight of someone else's rules. Even now, part of her didn't believe it would last. They spent the next few days repairing the horizon. It was slow work, but it gave them a sense of rhythm. Elias in the engine bay, Syrah in the hull corridors, checking for fractures every so often. They'd meet in a small galley, sharing a quiet meal. The silence between them was no longer sharp. It had become comfortable. One evening, while Elias was calibrating the main controls, Syrah walked into the cockpit. She didn't speak at first, just stood behind him, watching the soft light from the consoles play across his face. Then, in a voice low enough that it almost wasn't meant to be heard, she said, "You've changed me." Elias paused, his hands still on the controls. He didn't turn, but his voice was calm. "How?" "I don't think about what they called me anymore," she said. "Not the way I used to. I still hear it, but it's quieter now." This time he did turn, meeting her silver eyes. "That's because they were wrong," he said simply. For a long moment, they just looked at each other. Then she gave a small nod, as if sealing some unspoken agreement, and turned to leave. But before she could step away, the radar alarm broke the stillness. Elias' eyes darted to the screen. One ship, just one, was approaching fast. Its design didn't match the hunters, but it wasn't broadcasting any identification either. Syrah frowned. "Could be a trap, could be," Elias agreed, "but they're coming straight for us." The ship slowed as it neared, taking a position just off their port side. A transmission request flashed on the console. Elias hesitated, then accepted. The image that appeared was of an older Luran male, his features sharper than Syrah's, his voice deep and formal. "Syrah of the outer colonies," he said, "you must come with us. Your life is needed." Her hands clenched into fists. "I have no life with your people." she said coldly. The male's eyes softened. This is not about the council. It's about survival. You are carrying a child. The words hit the cockpit like a shockwave. Sarah blinked, stunned. That's impossible, she said. The male shook his head. Not anymore. Our scans confirm it. The child is strong, healthy, and half human. Elias turned sharply to her, but her eyes were locked on the image. The male continued. They said you could never bear life, but they were wrong. And now they will. Want you more than ever. The transmission cut abruptly for a moment. There was only the hum of the engines. Elias spoke first, his voice quiet but certain. They can want you all they like. They're not getting you. Sarah turned to him slowly, her mind spinning. She had been told her entire life that she was broken, unfit, a mistake, and now she carried proof that they had been wrong. Her breath came unsteady. I don't know how to feel, she admitted. Elias stepped closer. Then, feel this. You're not alone in it. For the first time, she didn't argue. Her hand found his without thinking. The warmth of his grip grounded her in a way nothing else could. The fear was still there, but it was smaller. Pushed back by something stronger, the radar pinged. Again, the Lyran ship was still waiting. They're not leaving, Elias said. Sarah's jaw set. Then we'll make them. Elias smiled faintly. That's the spirit. They moved together to the controls, preparing the horizon for another run. This time, they weren't just running to survive. They were running to protect something that belonged to them both. Outside, the stars stretched endlessly ahead. The hunters, the council. Now, the whole galaxy could come for them. But now, Sarah wasn't. The same woman who had hidden in the shadows of a dying ship, she was stronger. She was certain, and with Elias at her side. She would fight for the life growing inside her as the horizon surged forward, leaving the Lyran ship shrinking in the distance. Sarah glanced at Elias and saw the same thought in his eyes that was in hers. The future was uncertain, dangerous, and wild, but it was theirs. And for the first time in her life, that was enough.